Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie begins after the Earth has flooded, leaving most of its surface covered in water, with only 2 continents remaining out of the original 7. Due to this crisis, residential units were built in the middle of the water to provide security and protection. Now, we see a military unit called Base 42, which is home to 4 soldiers: Sergeant Sarge, Soldier Sullivan, Soldier Perez, and Cassidy, who is female. Supplies and aid have been cut off from this military unit for 3 months, and they have been suffering from severe hunger. As a result, Sullivan and Perez decided to fish for food from the water. They managed to catch a large amount of fish, but unfortunately a storm hit, causing the water level to rise higher than before. This damaged the military base, and Perez went down to repair the damage. However, when he came back up, he found that all the fish had fallen into the water, wasting all their efforts. Perez started yelling at them, saying, "We shouldn't stay here. Our duty ended nearly 3 months ago, and a replacement team was supposed to come and take over. Why are you staying silent and remaining in this place? We should abandon the base and return to our homes." But Sergeant Sarge yelled at him to silence him. After this argument, we see Sullivan sitting by the communication device, recording the messages he received on paper. Over the past period, the messages they received from the transmitter were always the same. No new developments, meaning the situation remained unchanged. The soldiers also sent the same message back to headquarters. Now, we see Sullivan and Sergeant Sarge on the station's roof, watching a ship approaching from afar. Sullivan was very excited, thinking it was the replacement ship. However, Sarge ordered them to prepare for defense and take precautions, considering it an unknown enemy ship. They were surprised by his reaction, but had no choice but to follow his orders since he was their leader. Cassidy tried to contact the ship via radio, but there was no response. Perez prepared the artillery to fire at the ship, but at this point, Sergeant Sarge changed his mind and ordered Sullivan to go down, take a boat, and explore the ship from the inside. He instructed Sullivan to use his weapon if he encountered any danger. Sullivan followed the orders, boarded the ship, and began exploring it silently, turning off the radio to avoid making any noise that could alert the enemy. After 10 minutes, Sergeant Sarge started calling for Sullivan to return. He called for him multiple times, but when Sarge lost hope, he ordered the ship to be destroyed, considering it a threat. Meanwhile, Sullivan was exploring the ship and found it empty, old, and stocked with food. Driven by hunger, he ate some of the food, then turned on the radio and reported that the place was clear. Sarge canceled the missile launch order, and they welcomed Sullivan and the ship. They began questioning what had happened to the relief team and why the ship arrived without its crew. Later, they took iodine baths, and Sullivan suggested sending different messages this time, asking why the ship came empty. However, Sergeant Sarge refused, saying, "If there was anything, they would have informed us." This raised suspicions about Sarge's actions and his refusal to do anything that might help them. Sarge continued to write down the ship's coordinates from its tracking device, mapping its route to see how it had arrived alone. The next day, we see Sullivan and Cassidy at the communication point, waiting for a message from headquarters. This time, Sullivan sent a different message, stating that the relief team was missing. Sarge arrived and asked why they were there. Perez told him that Sullivan had disobeyed orders and sent a message to headquarters. Just then, they received a reply from headquarters stating that the relief team was missing. They were shocked that their message had been returned to them unchanged. They realized that headquarters wasn't receiving or seeing their messages, and for the entire previous period, the same messages they had sent, saying "no new developments," were being returned to them without anyone actually responding. This left them deeply frustrated, as they lost hope and felt they would remain there forever. That night, Perez went down to the ship they had found to inspect whether it could be repaired. When he boarded, he found Sullivan waiting for him and asked where he had been. Perez explained his plans, saying, "What do you think about repairing the ship and escaping to our homes, abandoning the base?" He shared stories about his family waiting for him, saying, "I can't endure this anymore just to complete the duty for money. Now, I want to go home." Sullivan agreed with him, saying, "Tomorrow, we'll start repairing it. We'll also take Cassidy with us and leave." the sergeant behind since he won't agree to leave the base. Sullivan then went to talk to Cassidy and convinced her of the idea, as she was his lover. The next day, after repairing the ship, they were overjoyed when the engine started working. They were ready to leave but were surprised by the sergeant's presence. He thanked them and said, "I want you to dismantle it into parts because we need it to repair the base after it was damaged by the storm." However, they refused to follow his orders, so he threatened them with a weapon, forcing them to comply. Cassidy approached the sergeant and said, "Let them leave so they can bring us the relief team. We'll stay here, and I volunteer to stay with you at the base." Afterward, Perez and Sullivan began planning how to get rid of the sergeant or escape without his knowledge. But the sergeant caught on and announced a new decision, saying, "Soldier Cassidy has volunteered to stay here. Therefore, 2 of us will guard the base, and 2 will go to bring supplies and information. Sullivan and Perez, you will go, and Cassidy and I will stay at the military base." Sullivan was shocked because Cassidy was his lover, and he couldn't leave her behind. He tried to convince her to come with him, even offering to take her place, but she told him, "I never loved you. I was just spending time with you." We realize she said this to make him leave without her. Heartbroken, he left the room, and Cassidy began to cry. Perez started packing his belongings, and Sullivan did the same as they prepared to leave. Until they board the ship, and after this scene, we see Sergeant Sarge writing its coordinates and noticing something strange about the matter. At this point, they hear an emergency call approaching the ship from 600 meters away. Sergeant Sarge orders them to destroy the ship quickly this time, but they discover that the ship is moving away from them, waving at them. Upon closer inspection, they realize that this ship is their own. However, Sergeant Sarge releases the ship's anchor, and it starts drifting away. Meanwhile, Piers refuses to destroy it. Sergeant Sarge threatens him, raises his weapon, and fires a shot into the air. When they continue to refuse, Sarge shoots Piers in the ear, causing him significant pain. At this point, Sully fears for Piers and aims the cannon at the ship, forcing Sarge to back off. Piers, upon seeing the ship burning in front of him, collapses emotionally because that ship represented his last hope, and now it has been destroyed. He attempts to attack Sergeant Sarge and strike him, but Cassidy intervenes, hitting Sarge on the head and knocking him unconscious. They lock him up in the storage room. Piers takes all the alcohol and goes off to drink alone. Meanwhile, Cassidy and Sully sit by the transmitter and start monitoring communications. In another scene, we see Sully offering food to Sergeant Sarge, choosing a spoon instead of a fork to prevent him from using it against them. When Sully opens the door, he asks Sarge why he made them destroy the ship. Sarge explains that there is a traitor among them and begins to draw and explain on the wall. He tells him that the ship was heading toward them with 4 soldiers on board. These soldiers were meant to replace them, but the ship stopped far away, and the crew was killed. It arrived late and empty. Sully doesn't believe him, closes the storage room door and goes to the communication room, waiting and monitoring channels for news. In another scene, Sully and Cassidy spend time together. Cassidy talks about her family and how much she misses them. When it's her turn to monitor communications, Cassidy hides at one of the communication units. Piers approaches her, attacks her, and takes the keys from her. These keys activate the large missile located in the military base. However, Sully discovers the storage room window broken, indicating that Sarge either escaped or committed suicide. Sully and Cassidy rush to Sarge's room and find it empty. Sully searches through Sarge's belongings to verify his claims about the betrayal. Meanwhile, Cassidy and Piers decide to take the small boat and row to the nearest supply point to gather provisions, leaving Sully at the base to guard it. Sully begins exploring the base and reviewing Sarge's plans. He decides to fish, and when he lifts the net, he catches many fish but also finds Sergeant Sarge's body, shot in the head. It becomes clear that Sarge was murdered, not a suicide. Flashbacks reveal the events surrounding the rescue ship and the 4 soldiers on board. Suddenly, a boat circles them. The team stops the ship and, surprisingly, Cassidy descends and shoots everyone on board, killing them. The ship is left empty and arrives late. Cassidy is the only one who benefits from staying there, as she wants to acquire the large missile to ensure her people win and secure resources for themselves. Sully realizes who the traitor among them is. Kasdi returns and tells him that Piers became disturbed and threw himself off the boat. She claims she tried to stop him but couldn't. Sully hugs her, knowing she's lying and that she killed both Piers and Sarge. He plays along, understanding that she did all this to obtain the special weapon. Sully decides to destroy the weapon without her knowledge. While everyone is asleep, he activates the weapon. The next morning, Kasdi wakes up and tries to contact him via radio, but he doesn't respond. She hears the missile engine starting and rushes to the control room, but it's too late. Sully confronts her, saying he discovered all her actions and knows she killed Sarge, Piers, and the rescue team. She admits she deliberately stayed there because her people need the weapon. She pleads with him not to destroy it, but he refuses and activates the missile. The twist is that the control unit was programmed by Piers and requires a password only he knew. The missile doesn't launch. Kasdi and Sully remain together, and she tries to justify her actions for the sake of her people. In the end, he forgives her because he loves her and decides to ally with her for the benefit of her people. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video. Goodbye.